So for this next presentation, we have Anne Cornish, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. She's the General Manager of RIMPA and a long-standing friend of us here at McTish. So Anne will be talking about the evolution of information management, where we've come from, where we are, and where we're headed into the future. So Anne has pre-recorded her presentation for us, and you will hear her talk in a second about some of the circumstances of putting this together. So I just want to personally thank Anne for doing this, and I'll now start the presentation.
Hello everyone, it's Anne Cornish here, the General Manager of RIMPA. Just to preface this pre-recorded presentation, it should have been pre-recorded a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately I had to undertake some surgery and then experience some complications. So I'm pre-recording this from hospital only the day before the conference. So if you hear some beeps or some sounds or see some funny named wristbands on me, if I'm getting a bit animated at times, you know what it's all about. So everything's going well, so no one has to worry. It's all good. I'd just like to say thank you, a big thank you to McTish for being patient during the last couple of weeks and waiting on this. And I thank them for the opportunity to be involved. So let's get started. So my presentation today was to talk about the involvement of information management and how COVID has impacted us, and then what's RIMPA planning on doing in the next 12 months and beyond. And that's probably the path I'll take at this stage. So I'm just going to share the screen with everyone, so bear with me. Okay, so as the image expresses, it's very clear that information management has evolved. I mean, I appreciate that's a general evolvement image that we see all the time, but let's be honest. I mean, we've come from, caveman scratchings or drawings through to parchment, through to the print revolution, which then gave us heaps and heaps of paper, and then obviously into digital. And digital, and we'll continue to evolve, because I think digital means so much to different people. I mean, we're talking about digital transformation, we're talking about online services, we're talking about scanning and imaging, we're talking about emails, business intelligence, and look, the list just goes on and on. So the term digital, I think, is just continuing to evolve. And I think if we had this presentation in 10 years' time, guys, that it would be a very different, we wouldn't be talking about from the caveman point of view, we'd be probably talking about from the commencement of digital right through. A very interesting story for everyone. I actually had an interesting experience in being in hospital. So my father, unfortunately, recently has been in hospital. He was in a different hospital on the Gold Coast, and I'm actually in a private hospital here on the Gold Coast, where Dad was. And I'm quite happy to announce, but it's a government operated large hospital, which is the new Gold Coast University Hospital, fully digital, everything's done on computer. There's a computer, as in they pull them in from the hallways and off they go and they do what they need to do. But here at John Flynn, very different. It's the old paper record. And I've been here, I've lived on the Gold Coast, but sometimes I have a file that's quite large. Actually, I have parts, which was a little bit embarrassing the other day because I had to start another part. But anyway, I have 3 parts to my file. So they brought in the parts, and the parts had to sit on the end of the bed with me as I was wheeled around getting CT scans and whatever else was required. But my point of that too was that it gave me a little bit of a sense of distrust, or I wasn't confident that my record was going to get with me wherever I was. And it proved to sort of be slightly correct in a way, because when I went to the CT scan, the orderly pulled the file off the bed, put it on a chair next to, like a chair in the waiting area there, to move me onto another bed, and then forgot to put the actual file back on, other than I said, what about my file? I went, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, how many times a day does that happen? So my point of all that is the digital age if it's proven anything to me in the last couple of weeks, has made me more confident in that my information is available and it's with me, okay? It was really important that I knew that the next person that saw me knew I didn't have to ask me the same questions over and over again. But that's just what's happening, that evolving. So information management definitely has evolved. Sorry, just going to change slides. So the next, from a COVID point of view, the digital world's definitely changed the way we've worked. I mean, we wouldn't have, if we didn't have the digital world that we have, and the virtual platforms and the ability to communicate with each other and all that sort of thing during this last 12 months, let's call it 12 months, some have been impacted far more than others, that we wouldn't have been able to have been operational. If this had happened 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I don't even know if we would have operated or functioned as well as we have in the last 12 months. So from a digital perspective, information is available, it's readily available, it's accessible, and we can actually basically operate no different, and this has been a realisation by many, no different to if we're working from home, in the park outside, or in the office at work. And that's been a big eye-opener for many employers. It's also the first time during the last 12 months with COVID, it's the first time that the whole world, and I mean the whole world, everyone is in the same place, has the same issues and the same concerns, and probably has had the same benefits. That's fantastic. And when I say fantastic, it's a benefit because it's so much easier to share and to understand what we're all feeling. Worldwide issues can vary, as we all know. I mean, different parts of the world have different terrorism issues, different, you know, emergency issues, or different political issues. I mean, we've seen what's happened over in America of recent and with their elections, but so we don't feel that impact. We have a different impact. We have a different outlook. I don't know if people are, different people look at things in different ways. I mean, we could be looking at the politics happening in America and going, oh my goodness, we don't understand it. And what's going on, and why is this such a, you know, why are there riots and why are there people upset about the outcome? Where this is a one-time thing, this pandemic, where everyone in the world has this, it's unique, has the same issues and the same concerns, and is feeling the same way. So it's really been a good opportunity, let's call it an opportunity, where we can actually talk about things and justify or work out solutions that can suit a worldwide issue. From the concerns and the highlights within there's been, as I just mentioned, there's been some major concerns, and there's obviously been some highlights in relation to COVID. And I think there's the quote on the screen that you can see right now. Actually, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It's a Charles Dickens classic. But let's be honest with each other. There's been some things that are so true and have happened through COVID that have affected us all. We speak to members from a RIMPA perspective on a regular basis, obviously, and we get differences of opinions. We get some that are saying it's not fantastic, but obviously some are saying that the outcome of this has been a good thing, and some are saying, well, it hasn't really made any difference. Some are saying it's made it worse. So some of the things that we can say that have come out of, some of the issues that have come out of COVID that we've picked up on and that we've noticed as well from a RIMPA perspective is that the digital medium wasn't effectively in place in many organisations. I mentioned earlier, if it had been 5 or 10 years earlier, most places, 90% probably would have been in a position. But if I had to have a call on it from our membership base, I'd suggest to you that probably nearly 50% weren't ready for this immediate requirement for everyone to work from home. And can I say, totally understandable. RIMPA was in that position, had a path, or had a plan, I should say, to go with the virtual programs and have webinars and all this sort of thing, and to enable our regional, and it was aimed at our regional people that we would be able to offer our benefits regionally by having these wonderful digital platforms. And we certainly didn't have them at that point in time when COVID came into play. And the staff at RIMPA were amazing, and then implemented that within a month's time to enable that we then not just offer to regional, but we could offer to all our members. So digital mediums, that's great. We were great. We were in a good position. We had support of our management, our board, to allow us to do that. But bigger organisations, much bigger organisations who've got bigger infrastructures and you know, complicated information architecture and that sort of thing, weren't necessarily in a position to allow all their employees to work from home and actually function effectively. So that was a big problem. Information governance in itself wasn't implied. Hadn't been implied in many organisations to run in a virtual world or the digital world. So there was no governance around what do we do with our information while we're working from home. Do we silo it? Do we have access to systems? How do we manage this? There's no policies. There was no governance around it. That was a big issue. EDRMS, same as what I mentioned before about digital platforms. not everybody had access to the EDRMS at home as an employee. Major issue, organisations were encouraged or made to go and boom along and get this going and make it happen so that everybody had access. And obviously it's technology. I'm going to be quite honest, technology, there's always things that go wrong. So what we had was workers saving their information or their day-to-day work in a very different way. It could have been on USB sticks, it could have been on their laptop, it could have been to their home device. So we've now got, this is the concern of a lot of our members, there are silos of information sitting around in many places. So no longer do we have in the organisation, we're all worrying about, oh my goodness, we've got teams that just silo themselves off in their own little world and they have their own information. We've now got individuals that have siloed because some of them have been not made to, but they didn't have any choice, and others, excuse me, that's just the way they wanted to operate. So silos of information. Some organisations actually reverted back to paper. Believe it or not, we had a couple of private industry organisations that are members with RIMPA that decided that they'd go back to a more paper-based environment. I don't know the details of how that all worked, but that was their way of doing things. Some other areas of the concern through the COVID issue is the universities. As we all know, universities relied on very much on international students and the international market, I suppose, overall. And we've noticed, and our collaborative team of ASA and ALIA have been working hard over the last 6 months, and we have had numerous requests from various universities that where they're saying they're going to shut down their both under and postgraduate courses, or at least refine them down or diminish them down, whatever you may call it, or teach and then teach out. But this is a major concern to us as an industry because our ability to obtain qualifications are getting less and less. Then on the good side, there's those forced defiers. It's forced our defiers, I should say, to work with digital processes. You've always had those people that have said, no, we're not doing that, that we've done it this way, or we've always done it this way, and we're going to stick with that. But what we've found now within the COVID environment is that they had to work digitally, they didn't have a choice, otherwise they couldn't operate. A lot of those people, that forceability came in the finance area. That's been a bit of feedback that I've received. Also, what we also have noticed is that, interestingly, the organisations that had the COVID work from home restrictions imposed on them longer than others found that those digital processes remained embedded, so they haven't changed. Areas, organisations that weren't so, everyone's been affected, but were not impacted as much or for as long. Instead of being for 6 months, it may have been 6 weeks. Some organisations have reported that they're saying that people have reverted back to the old manual or paper process once back on site because it hadn't actually embedded in. So it was probably a good little statistic from an EDRMS implementation point of view that you need to really embed the process and get it, really in and everyone into it for a while before it actually is taken. So you might walk away after a week of implementing a new EDRMS digital process and then realise coming back a month or 3 months later doing your post-implementation review and they've reverted back. I found that a lot personally, but so that can happen. So it just the longer it's embedded in, was forced upon them, I suppose, it remained and they continued to use it. So it's also, COVID has encouraged many new professionals, and when I say new professionals, the millennials or people that have only been in the industry for a short period of time, it's encouraged those people to join, I'm not so much RIMPA, but yes, RIMPA as well, but to join an association, join colleagues, join communities, and seek that ability to actually share knowledge and seek advice. I think when before they could do it anywhere and they were able to, as much as millennials have sort of basically renowned for seeking advice virtually, apparently now it's discovered that they did it informally in an in-person way. And when COVID struck, the ability wasn't there. So the online communities and that sort of thing have really the pandemic, unfortunately, has enticed the new professionals to join, which has been great. The virtual communities, as we all know, have become bigger and better than anything and more. They are a reliable forum for interaction with your colleagues in any shape or form. standards of governance have been recognised. So everyone, that term, the trend, information governance, it's the way to go. It's been there. Everyone knows about it. Don't get me wrong. I know organisations are aware of doing something about it, but I think this has really forced the understanding and the recognise the importance of it during this pandemic era of work, because it's realised that it's made everyone realise that policies and that sort of thing is so important to ensure that things get done no matter where you are. Okay, so what are RIMPA doing? And I am mindful of my time because I know I can talk. Just on the screen, and I know it's not the best screenshot that you'll see, but it is a snapshot or an excerpt of our portfolio listing that has just been endorsed in the last month. So the board this year, the new board, have determined that they each will have a responsibility, a program of responsibilities, which I think is a fantastic thing. Instead of sitting just there, not that no one just sits there and does nothing, but they've actually taken on an independent or a piece of work that they can take responsibility for. This is obviously not the full list on the screen, but these are some of the primary issues that will be coming up in the next 12 to 18 months, if not beyond. So I mentioned earlier, education and advocacy and accreditation is a major issue for us. We need to look at we need to advocate for higher education, and we need to work with our collaborative partners in doing that. We work with them to develop what we're calling an education framework strategy, and it's a clear pathway. It's going to provide a clear pathway or understanding, I suppose, of what you need to obtain from a qualification point of view to actually increase in your skill set and to increase in your career. So we want to sort of marry the two together. We want to develop a university liaison network, which is something that I and the board have been doing now for the last 2 years, is building up relationships, but we now need to formalise this network and make sure that they speak on a regular basis. That will fall into part of what we wanted like to hold an education summit early next in 2021 and discuss with education providers of all levels about what we can do to manage trends. And look, I think there's many ways we can do this. It may not just be post and undergraduate type scenarios, and it may not just be an RTO or vocational education. It could be the new micro-credentials, which is short and sharp. It could be on-job learning. There could be a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of different ways of actually obtaining qualifications or gaining education. And obviously we're there to manage the course accreditation process, which we do quite successfully at the moment with ALIA and ASA, and where ALIA and ASA and RIMPA have been working closely on streamlining that process as well, so we don't want to make it hard for the universities. From professional development, it just adds on, we split the two. We thought that the higher education advocacy and accreditation was a whole lot of work in its own right. So from a professional development point of view, this is the RTO component, the RIMPA workshop component, and obviously we've added into as our mentoring program. Our mentoring program, which I'd like to quickly talk about, because it's probably something that you're not fully aware of, is we do have both an informal and formal mentoring program. We have mentors and mentees currently working together, which is great. We don't have a lot, don't have a lot of mentees. We do have a lot of people willing to be mentors, which is fantastic. It's normally the other way around. As a result of that, we're there to marry up, we give our mentees options, and it works out really well. So that you'll hear a lot more about that in the future. And the board portfolio lead for that, Janine Morris, is actually very keen on progressing that mentoring program. The other good thing that we want to work with is that I mentioned about good governance and standards, and that sort of thing is becoming more and more predominant and actually highly recognised during the last 12 months, is we want to work with good practice and standards. So we've become a member of the Digital Preservation Coalition. So, and we have representation on that group with the Australasia group. But we receive and we have the ability to communicate with 25,000 people internationally, again, mentioning all on the same page, all have the same problems here. I appreciate even from a digital preservation, whether there was COVID or not, we'd all have the same problems, but I think it pulls us all together even more, and that's probably another thing I've seen from the COVID point of view, is that it's pulled people together. We have representation on IT21. This is a new thing. We're looking at getting we're going to look to be registered as a ISO 3300 organisation so that we can accredit other organisations globally in that management standard, that records management standard. Management of records standard, I should say. We want to, and we've got more about that. We're really working. It's really in its infancy, but it could be a really great thing for RIMPA, and it's an international approach to things. Excuse me. Assessing research opportunities, continue to liaise with international bodies. Can't tell you how important that is. I know that everyone goes, why won't we stick with our own, and why aren't we looking within our own backyard and all that sort of thing. But can I tell you, as I mentioned earlier, again, that this impacted everyone. We've all got the same issues and we're learning off each other. And again, if anyone's aware, over the last 25 years from a standards point of view, Australia is the forerunner. Australia leads standards. Australia does that sort of, that's what we're renowned for, and they look for us. So our liaison with international bodies is really important. And the other thing we're looking at doing is we're developing, and it's happening as we speak, relationships with auditor associations. So when auditors go in and do their internal audits or external audits or whatever they may be, just audits, we want the ability to be able to say that they can include records managers or information managers into those audits, because a lot of the time they're auditing and making comments on those things that they don't know enough about. Moving on very quickly, the new professionals program, bit of a passion of mine, which is something I haven't been able to put a lot of time into. We want to be able to, and we've got some great people involved in this, and some really passionate people about getting our new professionals in. And I do understand the importance, because they are our future. And I just don't know if we've done very well at that. And including myself, I don't know if I've done that very well. I know I've mentored people and I've had proteges and I've made sure that I've helped people work through the industry, but we need to do that collaboratively as a group. So we're looking at developing a framework which will look at how we can entice and deal with, that's not the right word, but entice new professionals. A new professional is categorised as someone who's been in the industry for 5 years and less. That doesn't mean that they have to be 25 years old either. They could be 55 and only entering the industry. So you need to be mindful. Noobs doesn't mean young. Noobs means new to the industry. Expand new member opportunities. So how can we make it that it's easier? And now I am talking millennials, they don't sign up and do things like that we used to do. Well, I used to do. I'm probably older than a lot of you. But they don't have that same where they need to belong to a collective group. They just need things at times when it suits them. So we need to look at member opportunities that suits that group of people. New professional liaisons in that area, and student membership requirements. So we're looking at dual membership with ASA so that students don't have to pay for double of that. Just to finish off very quickly, so liaison and collaboration approach is that we're looking at continuing our collaboration and our wonderful relationship that we have with National Archives, both in Australia and in New Zealand, and also locally in our state records and archives offices. Information Awareness Month is going ahead in 2021. The format of that was probably going to be determined in these last 2 weeks, but I've been, as you know, out of action. So hopefully in the next month, we'll know what's happening in that area, but we're looking at doing a bit of a hybrid type event. It will be in Canberra. It will be in May, in line with Information Awareness Month. And we're looking at still doing some roundtable summits or scenarios where we have an international input into some what I call international, generic issues. We are, and I am speaking at the International Council of Archives in Dubai next week. Geez, I wish. Next year, when travel is allowed, and I'll be talking and representing RIMPA there. We're looking at collaborative surveys with our partners, with ALIA and ASA, and specifically around diversity management. So looking at how our industry fares in their sense of gender, race and cultural issues. So RIMPAs are very busy. I'm very busy. I need to get out of hospital, back into the office and back doing work. But I really enjoy doing this sort of stuff and presenting to you guys. And again, thank you very much, Tish, and I hope to see you all soon. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you again to Anne for putting that all together. I really appreciate it. I know everyone else does as well. So we now have a very brief morning tea break, and I will see you guys when we get back.